The name Tanzimat was specifically chosen since modernization and westernization fell out of favor due to European powers pressuring the Ottomans to reforms, but also to impose unequal treaties benefiting European merchants and bankers. Either way, the Tanzimat was meant to modernize all aspects of society and partially achieved this, which you can read in The Islamic Enlightenment by Christopher de Belaik. However, the reform progress came with lots of problems. To gloss over the Tanzimat period and to give you a rough idea about various aspects of it, on paper the Ottoman Sultan could mobilize Muslims in Arab lands since the 1830s. In practice, it was difficult to mobilize anyone. In 1844, a fifth army was created in Aleppo, which consisted of Arabs. A sixth army was created in 1848 in Damascus, and both armies had the duty of policing the provinces of Basra, Baghdad, and Mosul, as well as Hijaz. The armies were commanded by Turkish officers. Proper conscription was first introduced in 1877 during the Ottoman-Russian War, which was factually a breach in the social contract the Ottomans had so far with the Arab world, but most Arab-speaking intellectuals acknowledged the Ottoman decision at the time, agreeing that conscription was necessary. Prayers followed for the victory of the Ottomans in Arab lands. However, it is safe to say that resentment among Arabs grew. Not only are the Ottomans unable to protect them at this point, they can't even protect their own lands and invite Europeans more and more into the Middle East. Conscription in particular was especially unpopular among Christian Arabs who were free of any military service up to this point in time. The Tanzimat period brought a lot of Western inventions and reforms benefiting the Ottoman realm, especially in coastal Mediterranean regions where lots of Western architecture and infrastructure was established. Beirut, as an example, was a large village at the beginning of the 19th century, but around mid to end 19th century, Beirut became a premier port city of the Ottoman Empire. Furthermore, a representative provincial system was established where leading Muslim authorities would form a new body of authority. The authority of the governor was also limited, whereas the responsibilities increased. The system as well as the economic investment also led to the formation of a new middle class. Additionally, instead of military bureaucracy, a civil bureaucracy was on the rise. The intention was the implementation of direct Ottoman rule in all areas of the empire, which didn't work in certain Kurdish areas in eastern Anatolia or with the Druze or certain Bedouin tribes, since they always governed themselves, so further popularity was sacrificed and more unrest created. Land reforms were conducted. The Ottomans allowed private ownership of land with the only requirement being that people register themselves, but out of fear of conscription or out of indifference to the bureaucracy, this ended up with certain people owning more land, meaning instead of many small farmers and landowners, very few big farmers appeared. Taxation was also problematic, since fields did sometimes not yield enough to make a profit, which resulted in land being further sold instead of cultivated. The reforms also introduced bilingual newspapers. In Arab lands, the newspaper would have Arabic and Ottoman Turkish published alongside each other. In Aleppo, the official gazette was, for instance, called Furat or Firat. The reforms came with more and exclusive trade with European superpowers, where their own traders would have protégé status, meaning they wouldn't pay taxes and were exempt from Ottoman law. The reforms over-benefited Christians. Western powers would also groom Christians within the empire. As an example, American missionaries were grooming Nestorian Christians, which resulted in Nestorian Christians attempting to seize political power in the region, upsetting local Muslim Kurds, resulting in a war between the two groups. The conflict against Christians in general was further fueled by Christians controlling more and more of the local trade. Around the mid-19th century, more than half of Aleppo's import trade in terms of monetary value was in the hands of foreigners, Western foreigners. The reforms also required money, and with most of the world being under Western control, the Ottomans could only borrow money from the West, further deteriorating their situation. The grooming of Christians also resulted in nationalistic movements among them. A new bourgeoisie formed around this new nationalistic elite. Even though the Ottomans attempted to de-escalate the increasing tensions between its Christian and Muslim population, rumors of mobs forming and killing Christians or Muslims would circulate, leading to real mobs actually taking revenge based on mere rumors. As an example, when the Greeks revolted, rumors spread that they slaughtered Muslims, so vengeance was taken on the islands of Chios by Muslim mobs in 1821. So hysteria ruled Ottoman streets and fear appeared in both groups. False stories and rumors circulated more and more among both groups. Again, an attempt for de-escalation was done. In 1841, the Ottoman governor Esad Muhlis Pasha called in the ayans and ordered them to protect the Christians, whereas in Damascus, the local ayans would disperse Muslim mobs from harming Christians on their own. To make matters worse, a shift in Ottoman attitude appeared, with young officers and governors being more and more exposed to Western literature and Western people. Certain ill ideas were adopted as well. As an example, Abdulhamid II pressed on the claim that he is the sole caliph of the Muslim world, which was in violation of the Treaty of Erzurum in 1823, which made Iran and the Ottoman Empire acknowledging each other as caliphs. The caliph claim also came with a rejection by Morocco and Egypt. The argumentation of Arab intellectuals was that the greater caliphate cannot be given, whereas the lesser caliphate can be shared by multiple people. But this paled in comparison to more racist attitudes. In the late 19th century, the Ottomans would disregard Arab concerns and anxiety and label Arabs as just unruly. Not content with taking a piss on Arabs, the Neo-Turkish elite, aka Young Turks, would adopt racist attitudes toward Islam itself. Islam was blamed for the underdevelopment of the region, which was shared by a growing number of Muslim intellectuals. So at this point in time, we're not just talking about military failures of the Ottomans or the over-benefiting of Christians in Ottoman lands, or even the lack of emotional security. There is utter disrespect and disregard on Arab Islamic heritage. Despite all of this, there was still a large, loyal Arab society which looked favorable towards the Ottomans. There was no confidence in Ottoman political structure, but the Ottomans were still seen favorable. So what happened next? The Italian War, as well as the Balkan Wars, happened. Even if some Arabs still believed in some Ottoman protection, at least after the Balkan Wars, no one was in delusion that the Ottomans were still able to protect them. The most common reaction after the loss of Libya was to stand behind the Ottomans, but the voices for alternatives started to appear louder. The Balkan War, on the other hand, as well as the Russian War in the 1870s, where large amounts of Arabs died for the Ottoman throne, resulted in the demand of recognizing Arab as an official language in at least the Arab lands. There were also voices for more autonomy, but both were rejected by the COP. So we are at the eve of World War I, and we still have a loyal Arab population. Despite all the things I've mentioned, no major rebellions, and especially no rebellions against the Ottoman throne appeared to this point in time. Even after the war started, up until 1916, there is not a single Arab revolt against the Ottoman government. In 1915, 18,000 Arab tribesmen even willingly joined the jihad against the British and were placed under the Ottoman command, vigorously defending the Ottomans. They fought and died until the Ottoman command surrendered in April 1916. To make matters worse, a famine was going through Syria and Lebanon during World War I. Mohammed Kurt Ali reported that 120,000 people in Lebanon and 300,000 people in Syria died from diseases and starvation. It's impossible to confirm the numbers, but the situation was confirmed by the US Embassy. To make the situation even worse, Cemal Bey, one of the leading figures of the Turkish triumvirate, increasingly became paranoid. He arrested many people, among them those that were simply not pro-COP, with public executions taking place in 1915 and 1916, which resulted in massive local outrage. He also deported thousands of prominent Arabs from Syria to other places, and Arab conscripts were deliberately displaced to Gallipoli or the Russian frontier, whereas many Turkish troops were placed in Arab lands. This doesn't mean that the main force in Gallipoli or the Russian frontier was Arabic, it was still Turkish, but imagine the outrage. The deployment of Turkish troops to the Levant also makes sense since many Arabs deserted, but it also makes sense why a lot of Arabs deserted. At this point in time, the Ottoman government broke the centuries-old social contract between the Ottoman government and the Arab lands. The Ottomans failed to protect Islamic as well as Arab territory. The Ottoman government disregarded Arab concerns and labeled them as just unruly. The Young Turks started insulting Islam itself. Christians, and in particular Western nations, were given more and more power within Arab lands. And Jamal Bey started deporting and executing prominent Arabs. His paranoia is not without any ground, but imagine the outrage, and we yet have to get an Arab rebellion against the Ottomans. The rebellion did come in the end, not by the vast majority of Arabs, not by the tens of thousands of Arabs that were dying on the frontier for my ancestors, not by the population of Syria and Lebanon, where most likely tens of thousands of people would rather starve to death than endanger the war effort. It came from the Hashemites. The Hashemites were governing the province of Hejaz for about a millennia. In June 1916, the Sharif of Mecca, Hussein bin Ali, rebelled against the Ottomans. Around 10 to 30,000 Arabs were gathered and joined the British offensive. Now, this is again a topic of its own, but in Gallipoli, by Ed Erickson, it becomes painfully obvious that the Levantian frontier did not collapse because of Arabs. And Ottoman units stationed in Medina were extremely successful in holding their position. As an example, see Ömer Fahrettin Türkan, West Ground line of the desert. So where does the claim, the Arabs betrayed us, come from? From the divine butts of the descendants that took a piss on Arabs and Islam itself. The Young Turks joined the independence movement under Ataturk and were essentially forming the new Turkish identity and republic. So their ideology and anti-Arabic and anti-Islamic attitude carried over to the formation of Turkey. Does this mean that all of them were like that? No, obviously not. But this is confirmed by Said Nursi as well as in Ataturk by M. Şükrühanioğlu. Just to make this clear, I still consider the commanders of the independence movement as heroes, and I still believe that they did remarkable work with the foundation of the republic, giving the developing world hope that European superpowers can be bested. But we don't have to agree to every nonsense that came out of their mouth. And here's the important part that should be learned out of this part of history. As a Turk, and I'm speaking on my own behalf, you should have at least some respect to the deep loyalty of the vast amount of Arabs that co-governed, died and fought side by side with our ancestors. There is no doubt that the vast majority of Arabs tried, that they fought with us, that they bled with us, that they sacrificed themselves for us, that they died for us. Yet some Turks have more respect to the Greeks that committed atrocities across Anatolia than to Arabs. And my point here is not that you should hate Greeks, but that you should at least equally respect Arabs. And for Arabs and Arab nationalists, it should become clear that the Ottoman history is not just oppression, but that there was genuine attempt during the Golden Age, as well as during the Tanzimat era, to create a prospering society where Muslims and Christians could live side by side. The cause obviously got bastardized towards the last 2 decades of the Ottoman existence, but it should not overshadow all the effort and the sacrifices made by the Turkish side. I don't expect any Arabs to love me or my ancestors or to have some loyalty, but I think some respect is in order, regardless of the ups and downs that came with the Ottoman rule. So in short, don't look for enemies where there are none. Fun fact number 1. The Ottomans did not divide the Arab lands culturally. Arabs were Arabs in Ottoman eyes. The Ottomans knew that Arabs are different. However, the word Arab was used for everyone. A Turk born in Arab lands was called Arab, like slaves that were bought from Oman, originating from Africa, but living in Arab lands, were equally seen as Arabs. Fun fact number 2. The Ottomans wanted to build a naval base in Yemen in order to conduct expeditions into the Indian Ocean, with potential overseas bases around the Indian Ocean stretching all the way to Malaysia and Indonesia. So the Ottomans were genuinely intending the formation of a state stretching from Vienna all the way to Indonesia. However, Shia rebels made the entire adventure too costly. The Shias in Yemen considered the war against the Ottomans a holy war and made the Ottoman presence in the region unaffordable.